Chapter 6 In the Long Night. The following day, they changed up my lessons, and I spent most of the day with Vaughn and Ari learning how to handle a situation like the one Caleb and I had encountered. Caleb, I hope you didn't pull away intentionally and be like, I failed as her teacher. If she had been trained by somebody else, this wouldn't have happened. There was an emphasis on working together and not doing my own thing without informing teammates. Which was fair. Vaughn had a lot to say about the situation, most of which Caleb had already said. She was just sweeter about it. But I felt bad for worrying them all. After that, they further pushed aside my training with Caleb to give me some time with Ari. Oh no, Ari's making them plays now. Darn it. Even Vaughn agreed it would be best to learn some defense strategies for the time being. The focus on learning to mimic was important, but now there was a shift in thinking I needed to learn to mimic some practical abilities, like how to shield myself. Vaughn was already slotting in time to teach me more about safe side bursts, though. For the time being, Ari was teaching me about shields and line-of-sight teleportation, and keeping my sphere engaged so I was more aware of what was going on around me. The incident in the city highlighted just how unprepared I was to handle such situations. In a way, it was a blessing in disguise, I suppose. I was just thinking that, because I'm like, well, now the council has to rethink, like, do we send this girl into the field? I didn't see Caleb for several days. Something Ari assured me was temporary.
Caleb is still your primary instructor. This is only a temporary shift in focus. You'll be returning to working with him in a couple of days. We'll be splitting focus between our lessons starting the day after tomorrow. We are still working out your exact schedule, but you should receive it by tomorrow morning.
So we're doubling my training schedule?
Essentially, yes.
That's fair.
Indeed, given how clear it's become that we cannot assume an untrained Esper, no matter how powerful, will handle a dangerous situation well.
Thanks for the reminder of that.
It won't help if we avoid acknowledging what happened.
I know. Is Caleb still going to be mad at me when he's back? Is he going to constantly bring up what happened?
I believe you have interacted with him enough by now to guess the answer to the latter question. As for the former, he isn't angry at you. He's angry at himself.
Yep.
Our job is to protect you.
He did! I mean, he got shot because of me.
I suspect he is questioning the wisdom of getting involved in the situation instead of prioritizing your safety. You weren't in a dangerous situation the moment you chose to move into the open. You were in a dangerous situation from the moment he chose to engage with that man.
He was trying to protect everyone else, though. That's our...
I realize you are about to say, that's our job, and you are correct. However, Caleb does not agree that protecting civilians should always come before protecting our own. We may not be civilians, but we are people. And you, more than any of us, did not ask to be here.
This is a topic we've settled, or at least that we should have settled by now.
Caleb isn't one to let things go just because he's told to.
He can be frustratingly stubborn.
I concur. Now, back to what I was saying about your sphere.
Let's get back on topic here. Ugh. I was so tired. In some ways, Ari's training was more exhausting than Caleb's, but it was mental exhaustion more than physical, which somehow made it more difficult to rest. Sometimes I wondered why my training hadn't started with shields, because we started Caleb's route, girl. If you started Ari's route, then you would have learned shields. Though I suppose I had my answer if I continued with that line of thinking. If Caleb had complex psi, it was nothing compared to Ari's. Set aside just learning how to compress my psi into a functional shield, which was both easier and more difficult than something like enhancing muscle performance. Pouring everything I had into a shield that could actually block things was tough. How did you take something as intangible as psi energy and use it to block physical attacks? The amount of focus it took was exhausting, and Ari was a demanding teacher. There was the added component that they didn't want me to just learn skills. It was the mimicking that the council most wanted to see progress on. Fortunately, I had experience mimicking Ari's psi already. That's a good point. because in Crimson and the Court, she's doing some mimicking, but she's very much like taking that base mimic and then adapting it to herself. And the council does not encourage individuality with your Psy at all. They're just like, just mimic it perfectly, but like stronger, okay? It was a little different doing it on purpose, but if I didn't do my usual thing of overanalyzing it all, I could manage it. Doing without thinking wasn't easy, though. Not for me, anyway. And with the change in focus, I was finding it difficult to sleep. Now that I had more training in expanding my sphere of awareness, but less in how to block things out, it was even worse. It was one thing to have noisy neighbors. It was another when they were quiet, but you kept peeking into their apartment by mistake. For tonight, I'd given up and went for a walk to get my mind off things if possible. The lounge was dark and silent when I got there, and empty. The stillness and lack of other people nearby helped me to clear my head and calm down a little. But looking out at the beautiful city lights was a reminder how alone I sometimes felt in it all. For a little while, I worked on responding to a message from Mum. She wanted to know everything about life here. Her frustration was palpable when I told her we could only communicate this way. Her last message included some carefully worded but also amusingly pointed remarks about it. I hadn't told her things were being read by others because I didn't want to upset her, but I suspected she knew. Yeah, probably she could tell from the tone of your letters that she's like, my girl is holding things back. Someone is reading our mail. She also knew there were things I wasn't telling her. I could catch the tinge of frustration in her notes. Not at me, of course, just the situation. There was also worry, but mostly reassurance. When I was convinced they were all upset at me, she had done everything in power to assure me it wasn't the case. And she made a point to downplay the disruption to their lives. It was very like her. I hated not being able to tell her everything like I used to. That was why I finally closed my half-finished message and decided it wasn't helping me relax. I was wondering if you were going to make it to the garden. I ended up making my way to the garden for a walk instead. It was a peaceful respite from everything else about this place that frustrated me. I walked down the winding paths, my mind still stuck in one place. Maybe I should talk to Magnus about the message thing. Girl, why do you keep getting distracted? They might be afraid I would blow the cover off Endgame secrets, but surely I could have an unmonitored conversation with my mother by now. It had been a few weeks since my arrival already. I stopped, staring hard at the ground in front of me. This is defeating the purpose of a walk, isn't it? Caleb's image flashed in my mind. And Ari? Only seconds later, I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps behind me. Well, hello. I turned, unsurprised to find them both standing there. I knew it was you.
It appears our work developing your sphere of awareness has been successful. You detected who it was before turning, didn't you?
Yeah. I guess no one will sneak up on me now. I've officially improved.
That is some small comfort, all things considered.
I couldn't tell if he was teasing or serious. Next to him, Caleb shoved his hands in his pockets, frowning. Perhaps at me, though it might be something else. Hello, stranger.
What are you doing up this late? You're pretty new here to already be having trouble sleeping. You needn't make it sound as if everyone struggles with sleeping. What are you talking about? We do all have trouble sleeping. It is a high-stress job, I suppose. You suppose. Everyone responds differently to stress, and not everyone is affected to the point they struggle with insomnia.
And yet, here we are. I gestured around at the three of us meeting in the garden while everyone else slept.
Acute insomnia because of a difficult day is not the same as a chronic condition, such as in Caleb's case.
If Dr. Sosky was here, he'd be questioning when you got your medical license.
No comment.
He chuckled, the usually impassive expression softening in a way I almost hadn't believed possible. Oh, Ari.
I believe you're right.
I won't tell him if you won't.
We have an agreement. And you didn't answer my question, Leone.
Can you please stop doing that? I much prefer to go by Morgan. I know you're capable of using my first name. You did it twice, at least. Last chapter. The corners of his mouth turned down, and he looked away, folding his arms across his chest. The Caleb pout I had already gotten used to. And to your question, you already know the answer, right? There's a lot on my mind these days, and I haven't been sleeping well since my arrival. But it's a little worse than usual the last few days.
Your augmented training regimen is likely causing additional stress. Thanks, Doctor. Should Morgan and I put in a recommendation for a transfer to the medical division? Feel free. I suspect a spurious recommendation would elicit a lecture from Dr. Sosky. It could prove entertaining to watch. Perhaps it would be a distraction for Morgan.
I giggled at their ribbing. It was amusing hearing Ari tease back, in his own way. To my surprise, Caleb set his hand on my head, giving it a quick squeeze. A strangely brotherly gesture. No, do not, for the love of God, whatever you do, do not put this man in the brother zone. I swear, I am still scarred from too many other roots like that, so do not. X. No more of that going forward.
You don't have to worry about anything but taking care of yourself right now.
It's easy to say that. I miss when the worst thing I had to worry about was doing well on the next exam. None of this training or worrying about relics making their way into the hands of dangerous people.
I'm curious. Here we go.
Ari shot him a disparaging look.
I recognize that tone, and whatever comes out of your mouth next is going to be annoying. If you don't want to hear it, perhaps you could try covering your ears. I could also try just covering your mouth.
Oh, pew 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 pew! Got him! And I laughed at the two of them once again. I would never have figured the two of them for proper friends. I guess working together for such a long time will do that to you. What were you curious about, Ari? Unlike Caleb, I'm interested to hear what you were about to say.
Your goal was to study the ancient cultures of Arcalis, was it not?
I think everyone knows that by now.
Is this not an opportunity to do that?
Well, first, I didn't want to study them by becoming a victim of their weird remnants. Second, Arayan civilization wasn't my area of interest.
It is still tangentially related, and the relic we recovered is now in the research facility. Given your rank and history, it's likely they would allow you to have a look at it. Now that it's deactivated, it's no longer a threat.
Do we know that, though? Well, it's not that I'm completely uninterested. I suppose it hadn't occurred to me I could visit the research facility.
The investigation teams have not yet uncovered further information about the relic situation. Until that happens, your focus will only be in training. With little else to do, there is no harm in turning a frustrating situation into an opportunity to explore a topic of potential interest.
I suppose I hadn't thought about it that way. I don't even know where the research facility is.
Don't you have access to the building map?
No, I don't. Just messages, a schedule, some basic information about Endgame and those in charge. And the weather. They seemed determined to give me the bare minimum. Caleb rubbed his forehead, a quiet groan escaping.
Oh, I'll have another talk with them. This is ridiculous. At this point, you're a full-fledged member of the organization. To be fair, it hasn't even been a month. New recruits aren't given that sort of... Most of the new recruits are 9 years old, Ari! She got shot at by some relic-wielding bastard in the middle of the street! If it hadn't been for me, she'd have gotten shot. And you got pulled in to train her in case they send her out to get shot at some more. If she can get shot at, she can get a damn map.
You know what? I agree with that.
And she can call her mother without someone listening in! I admit, I can see the logic there. If the admin won't give you permissions back, we'll just badger Magnus into it.
Can he do that?
What do you think?
I'm not sure I want to owe him a favor.
He ever replace those tangerines you were so worried about?
Not at this particular juncture, no. No? though I wouldn't say I was worried about them.
You've mentioned them at least 3 times since your arrival.
Have I?
It seems like Magnus still owes you one.
Interesting. Does Magnus owe me one through you guys? Kidnapping? Or... because I didn't run into him this time. I'm confused. But I'll take it anyway. Okay. Fair enough.
And I hope you consider my suggestion about the lab.
I will. If I have the time and energy with the new training schedule.
Speaking of which, we have another lengthy session scheduled for tomorrow. I believe I shall return to my room to get some rest. You should do the same soon, Morgan.
I'll try. Thank you. He left us there, making his way back up the winding path until he disappeared from sight. When it didn't seem like either of us would follow, Caleb started away, flicking his hand forward in an indication I should follow.
There's a bench over here if you want to sit.
Oh? Not going to lecture me into going to bed? He shrugged as I followed him to the bench.
Not much point in going to bed if you can't sleep. I know that firsthand.
Can't you use that biokinesis to make yourself fall asleep? He gave me a scathing look.
I'm not a lousy enough teacher for you to not realize that's a stupid suggestion.
I could try to use biokinesis on you to make you fall asleep.
First, rooks can't use biokinesis on other people. Second, there's no way in hell I'd trust you to put me to sleep like that.
I mean, I could just clock you on the back of the head with something instead. But I'll have you know I'm a very trustworthy individual.
I couldn't trust you to stay put the other day, could I?
Ouch. Is this going to be like the building thing where you never forgive me and bring it up at the most annoying times?
This is a lot worse than the building thing. You could have been seriously hurt this time.
Or you could have been.
I've been hurt before.
Is that supposed to make me not care if you get hurt again?
You don't have any reason to care what happens to me.
I was silent for a moment, taken aback by that statement. Always affectionate. You don't need a reason to care about someone. Or maybe you do. I don't. Besides, if you want to look at it from a practical standpoint, it's not like I can afford to lose my teacher. Caleb stiffened and looked away fast enough I knew I'd hit a nerve. One of his hands resting on the bench between us was now clenched into a tight fist. He lost his teacher? I wonder if Jack and him shared a teacher, because Jack also lost his teacher. Without thinking, I reached for his hand, covering it with mine. He jerked it away like I had burned him.
I don't want to talk about it, and I don't need your sympathy.
I understand. I'm sorry. Caleb gave me a sharp look, and I thought he must have been expecting me to snap back. I couldn't deny I didn't appreciate being snapped at, but I understood that everyone had those sorts of wounds. And when someone touched them, it was human nature to lash out. Even if I wanted to, it wasn't fair to get mad about it. Caleb let out a slow breath, shutting his eyes as he tilted his head sharply to the side, eliciting an uncomfortable pop.
No, I'm the one who's sorry. You can't be aware of every landmine in this place. There was no reason to snap at you.
Well, everyone has things they don't want to discuss. I'll drop it. Though I don't think people feel sympathy for each other because there's a need for it.
I guess not.
Just like how people don't care for each other because there's a reason.
I guess that's true too. Though take it from me on this one. Keeping those feelings to yourself will save you a lot of pain.
Seems like an unpleasant way to live, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's impossible for me to not care about the people I work with and talk to on a daily basis. If you want me to not care, then you should just ask to be transferred.
Yeah, I don't think I can do that. Someone has to keep an eye on you.
There's always Vaughn and Ari.
I think I'll stay.
Then don't ask me not to care if you get hurt.
You know... You're too good a person for this place, Morgan.
I've heard that in several places, actually. But I do agree every time, because Morgan is a very good person. I doubted it was uncommon for people to care about each other here. Caleb had just locked himself away at some point. Every so often I could catch a glimpse of why. I leaned my head on my knees and shut my eyes to the sound of the quiet trickling of water and Caleb tapping his foot beside me.
If you're going to fall asleep, you should go back to your room.
I won't fall asleep here.
Still not tired?
I'm getting there.
There's not much I can do about the training schedule, but I'm sorry for adding to the pressure. I'm sure I have.
The pressure will be there, with or without you.
I don't get you. Half the time you're complaining, and the other half you're acting like you're just taking it all in stride.
Because that's my strategy. Complain about it until I can take it in stride.
That's a hell of a strategy.
It's worked for me so far.
Oh? Had a lot to complain about in New Albion, did you?
I know it seems trivial compared to what everyone here goes through, but the expectations of New Albion's meritocracy are pretty heavy sometimes. The constant threat of losing all forward progress in life if you fail to excel and overachieve was intense. It's not the same as the expectations here, but that doesn't mean it wasn't stressful.
I guess everyone has their troubles.
They do. And it's hard to see what others are dealing with from the outside. Just like I had a lot to learn about being a member of Endgame.
I can't make any promises, but I guess it wouldn't hurt to see if I can do something about training to make it less unpleasant. At the very least, I don't want you to get into the habit of not being able to sleep.
I'm looking forward to seeing what less unpleasant means to you.
Maybe a game of Volatant instead of the normal routine in the training room.
Forget unpleasant. Volatant with you sounds outright horrifying.
I suppose that depends on how much you enjoy losing.
I don't enjoy it at all.
Then I guess I'll have to think of something else.
But when you say that, it makes me determined to kick your butt at it someday.
Well, I don't dislike that stubborn streak that rears its head sometimes.
You're such a pain.
Take a good long glimpse in the mirror when you get back to your room, and say that again.
Okay, I will, but I'm not sure why you want me to tell my reflection that you're a pain.
Pain in the butt.
I think that's something your reflection needs to hear.
What I think is that you need to get your ass to bed so you're ready for training tomorrow.
Fine, fine. But you should go up too. I'm not the only one that needs sleep.
I'll go soon, don't worry.
Good night, Caleb.
Yeah. See you in the morning.
That was a wonderful conversation. I felt so, I don't know, it was just very natural and very cute and teasing. I'm glad that they're kind of smoothing some things over. That's good. I left him there sitting on the bench, leaning over to read on the display he'd been carrying with him the whole night. Boy be reading again. Always reading. I had no idea if or when he actually did go to bed, but I, at least, was finally feeling tired enough to fall asleep as soon as my head touched the pillow.